The fog. In London, in this year of our Lord, 1888, the fog is not weather. It is a shroud. It is a living, breathing thing. It wraps itself around the city's throat, muffling its cries, swallowing its secrets. It clings to the soot-blackened brick of tenement and palace alike. It tastes of coal smoke and the river's ancient rot, and it turns the thousand gaslights of the empire into 1,000 hazy, dying embers. They call this place the capital of the world, the heart of an empire on which the sun never sets. But the sun never rises here. It only tries. I know its true name. I know the alleys that vein its flesh, the poverty that festers in its guts, the hypocrisy that poisons its heart. And I know the things that hunt in its shadows. My name is Arthur Graves, Detective Inspector, Scotland Yard. Though, of late, the title feels like a costume. A thin, respectable veneer of order painted over a roiling, primal chaos. The yard calls me brilliant. The press calls me tormented. The men in the rookeries. They have other names. But the one I hear most often, in the suffocating quiet of my own cold flat at 2 in the morning, is failure. It began, as all things in this city seem to, in Whitechapel. Whitechapel, not so much a district as a disease. A teeming, desperate sprawl of humanity packed into crumbling tenements and labyrinthine courts. A place where the air is thick with the competing stenches of cheap gin, unwashed bodies, stale bread, and the cloying, metallic sweetness of the slaughterhouses. It is the city's dark conscience, conveniently forgotten, left to fester. I was standing over what was left of Mary Ann Nichols. The call had come before dawn, a hammering on my door that felt like it was coming from inside my own skull. It had dragged me from a fitful sleep haunted by faces I could no longer save. My boots were wet before I'd even left my own street. The fog was so dense it was like walking through gray, sodden wool. It was an ocean, and I was drowning in it. Bucks Row, a nothing street, a sliver of mud and refuse between two lightless warehouses, their windows like dead eyes. The beat constable who found her, a young lad named Neil, was still being sick against the wall, his helmet in his hand, his youthful face a mask of green-white terror. The police surgeon, Dr. Phillips, a man I respected, was kneeling, his bag beside him. He looked up at me, his face grim. "Arthur, this is not one you'll forget." I pulled back the rough canvas sheet. A sharp, wet sound, like cloth pulling from a wound. Even for Whitechapel, this was new. The papers would call it brutal. Brutality is a fistfight outside a pub. Brutality is a drunkard beating his wife. A sound so common in this district it serves as a lullaby. This was dissection. There was a terrible, cold precision to the butchery. A surgeon's hand, perhaps, but a surgeon's hand guided by a lunatic's mind. Or, a mind of terrible, singular purpose. Her throat had been severed twice, the cuts deep, savage, down to the spine. But it was the rest. The mutilations. Phillips, a man who had seen the worst the river and the railways could do to a human body, was pale, his voice low. He knew his anatomy. "Arthur," he murmured, rising and wiping his hands on a cloth. This wasn't a frenzy. He didn't just hack. This was work. He was methodical. He took his time. I lit a thin cigarillo. The cherry red tip a pinprick of fire in the gray. The smoke did little to mask the coppery tang of iron in the air. "Work," I repeated. The word felt obscene. I looked at her face, eyes wide, staring at the indifferent, smoke-stained sky she could not see. She was 43. A life of hardship and gin, ended in a gutter for reasons we couldn't even begin to fathom. "Any witnesses?" I asked Neil, who had finally wiped his mouth, his knuckles white on his truncheon. He shook his head, still trembling. "Not a soul, Inspector. This street's a ghost run, till the factory's open. Heard a cart rattle by 'bout half an hour before I found her, but nothing else. It's the fog. He could have been right next to me, and I'd not have known. The fog, always the fog. It was his accomplice, his cloak, his co-conspirator." I knelt, ignoring the filth seeping into my trousers. I studied the ground. No signs of a struggle. No dropped weapons. No footprints save for our own, lost in the mire. Just the body, an offering left at a dark altar. He's clean, I whispered. Sir? Asked Neil. He's clean, I said, louder, standing up. No blood trails. No discarded tools. He walked in, performed his operation, and walked out, as calm as you please. I felt it then, a cold prickle at the base of my spine. This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't robbery. Her few, pathetic possessions were untouched. This was a statement, a prologue, and I, Arthur Graves, was its intended audience. Before I could process further, a heavy tread crunched on the gravel, followed by a wet, hacking cough. Inspector Edmund Walsh, a bull of a man, with a face like a slapped ham and eyes as small and mean as a pig's. He ran the local division, H Division, and by ran, I mean he owned it. His pockets were lined with protection money from the very brothels and high-rip gangs we were meant to be policing. He was the poster child for the rot at the yard's core. Morning, Graves, he grunted, not looking at the body, but at me. His breath smelled of stale whiskey. Slumming it, are we? Warren sent his prize bloodhound down from his high and mighty office? Inspector. I nodded, my voice tight. A bad one. Walsh finally glanced down. He curled his lip. Bad? It's Whitechapel. They're all bad. He prodded the body with the toe of his boot, trampling the very ground I'd been trying to preserve. Just another whore got her wages. Fought with her pimp, I expect. Bucks Row is full of 'em. My hand twitched. Her pimp didn't do this, Walsh. Look at the cuts. This was surgical. Surgical? He laughed, a wet, barking sound. You and your fancy words. You think 'cause you read a book or two, you know the street. This is animal work, and I'll find the animal. He turned to the pale constable. Neil, he roared. Stop your blubbering. Start rounding up the Yiddishers from the boot factories. One of 'em's always carrying a sharp knife. I'll have a confession by noon. You'll have a scapegoat, I said, my voice dangerously cold. It's what the commissioner wants, Graves. Walsh jabbed a fat finger at my chest. A body on a rope. Keeps the press happy. Keeps the toffs in the West End from having to read about this unpleasantness. He stepped closer, his bulk blocking the weak light, his whiskey breath hot on my face. Don't get in my way. This is my territory. Your brilliance ain't welcome here. He stomped off, bellowing orders, contaminating the scene, his men's boots churning the mud, destroying what little evidence there was. He was the other side of the city's sickness, the rot within the yard. I looked back at Mary Ann Nichols. I had two monsters to hunt now. The days that followed were a blur of cold tea, colder leads, and the suffocating bureaucracy of Scotland Yard. Commissioner Warren, a man more soldier than policeman, wanted arrests. He wanted quiet. Walsh has a suspect, Graves, he boomed in his cavernous office, waving a report. A Jewish anarchist, leather worker, name of Pizer, blood on his apron. It's a slaughterhouse district, sir. Everyone has blood on their apron. It's a false lead, I'd insisted, my voice flat from exhaustion. It's a lead, which is more than you've given me. You're giving me theories, psychology. I don't need psychology, Graves. I need an arrest. This is filth preying on filth. Find me a body to hang. Inspector Aberline, a good, decent man, caught me on the way out. Arthur, he said, his face etched with concern. Don't let this one take you under. Walsh, he just wants a result. You want the truth. They're not the same thing. Not in this city. The truth is all that matters, Frederick, I said. Is it? He replied, quietly. Or is it just the thing that will destroy you last? I ignored him. I walked back into the streets. Filth preying on filth. The comfortable, damnable lie of the powerful. I spent my nights in Whitechapel, sitting in the corners of pubs that smelled of spilled beer and despair, listening. The women, the unfortunates, they were terrified. They spoke of a ghost. Spoke proper. Did. One woman, Mary, told me, her face a web of broken veins. But his eyes, dead, like a doll's eyes. I moved through the opium dens in Limehouse, the smoke thick and sweet, bodies piled like driftwood in the gloom. I leaned on informants, men whose loyalty was bought with shillings and sustained by fear. They knew nothing. The underworld was as blind as we were. This killer, he was an outsider. My flat grew colder. The case files piled on my dining table, charts of the alleys, coroner's reports, witness statements that all said the same thing. Nothing. I stopped sleeping. When I did close my eyes, I saw her face. The staring, empty eyes. The anatomical precision. While I hunted, the press began its own feast. And one name stood out. Eleonora Vance. Her columns in the Pall Mall Gazette were different. She wasn't just reporting the horror, she was investigating the lives. She was painting a picture of Whitechapel that shamed the very crown. And she was asking questions about police corruption. About Walsh. She was good. Dangerously good. Then, 8 days later, he struck again. Annie Chapman. Hanbury Street. It was worse. Far, far worse. I was there in 20 minutes. The sun was trying to burn through the morning mist, casting a sick, yellowish light over the scene. It was the backyard of a tenement. A narrow, squalid space filled with rubbish and the stench of decay. She was propped against the fence. A choked, guttural sound. He had escalated. The throat was cut with the same savage strength. But this time, he had taken trophies. Phillips was on his knees, his hands shaking as he made his notes. He's taken her womb, Arthur. And other parts. He cut them out, with the same damn surgical skill. But faster. He was interrupted, perhaps. I looked at the house. The windows were full of pale, terrified faces, staring down at us. Interrupted? I said, my voice a rasp. In a yard full of people? A woman was weeping in the doorway, clutching a shawl. I saw her, sir. Not an hour ago. She was at the front step, going to get some for her rent. I went to the market. Came back, and, not an hour. In broad daylight, surrounded by hundreds of people. The sheer, contemptuous arrogance. I walked the yard, my eyes scanning every inch. And I found it. Near the wall, partially obscured by a dustbin, lay a small, sodden leather box. An instrument case, a surgeon's case, empty. And beside it, a few coins. A piece of muslin, arranged, deliberately. This wasn't an interrupted killer. This was a performance. He wants us to know, I said to Phillips. Know what? That he can. That he is a surgeon. That this is a ritual. This is not a story, madam. A woman is dead. I turned. A woman in a smart, dark dress, a notepad in her hand. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and held no trace of fear. Eleonora Vance. And more will be, Inspector, she said, her voice crisp, if you and that oaf Walsh only see what you want to see. I'm investigating these unfortunates, as you call them. They're women, and they were terrified before this started. Terrified of the high-rip gangs. Terrified of men like Walsh, who lined their pockets with their blood money. She was sharp, too sharp. Print your gossip, Miss Vance. Leave the police work to us. I will, she said, her eyes flashing. And I'll print that you found a surgeon's case, while Inspector Walsh is busy beating a confession out of a Polish cobbler he just dragged from his bed. I saw him on the way here. The man's face was pulp. She knew. I paled, grabbing her arm. How did you? I have eyes, Inspector. Just like you. I use them to talk to the living. She pointed with her pen to the ground. And I see that. The coins. The muslin. This isn't just murder. It's a sermon. What's the text, Inspector? She wrenched her arm free and was gone, melting into the shocked crowd. A new player. One I couldn't control. I went to the holding cells. She was right. Walsh's suspect, the cobbler, was a pathetic creature, his face beaten, sobbing in Polish. He was innocent. I knew it, and Walsh knew it. This was about protecting his gangland paymasters. That night, the first letter arrived. It was sent to the Central News Agency. Scrawled in red ink, it was a taunt, a boast. It was full of crude jokes and promises of more work. It was the first time he gave himself a name. I am down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. My knife's so nice and sharp I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. It was signed, in the same mocking, crimson hand. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. The name hit London like a thunderclap. It was on every newsboy's lips, on every placard. The fear, which had been a simmering, localized dread, now exploded into a city-wide panic. The fog seemed to thicken, and in its swirling gray, every man in a tall hat was a suspect, every shadow a threat. And I became obsessed. This was no longer a case. It was a duel. I rented a small, damp room above a bakery in Whitechapel, the smell of stale bread a constant presence. I dressed in the rags of the poor, my face smeared with grime. I shed Arthur Graves, Inspector, and became another ghost. I walked the alleys, the doss houses, the gin palaces, not as a policeman, but as something else. I needed to understand the hunting ground. I needed to think like him. The other detectives thought I was losing my mind. Perhaps I was. You look like hell, Graves, Aberline said, finding me in a pub. Go home. Get some sleep. Sleep is a luxury, Frederick, I told him, my eyes burning from exhaustion and brandy. He doesn't sleep. He waits. He watches. And he plans. I was in an alley off Brick Lane, following a man in a tall hat, who turned out to be just a drunk, when I was cornered by three high-rip men. They didn't like my questions. They didn't like my face. I saw the glint of a knife. I was tired, ready, almost, but some part of me, the old part, fought back. It was a blur of fists and filth. I woke up hours later, my hands bloody, my ribs on fire, with no clear memory of how I'd escaped. My first true blackout. My mind was a razor, honed by sleeplessness and brandy. I collected the scraps of his presence. The leather case, the taunting letters, the surgical precision. A doctor? A butcher? A mad aristocrat? I was chasing Walsh's gang connections when I ran into Eleonora Vance again. She was alone, in the dark, taking notes. You're a fool to be here, I hissed, pulling her into a doorway. I'm a fool if I'm not, she countered, unafraid. I'm not like you, Inspector. I'm not just looking in the gutter. I've heard whispers, not from the gangs, from the other side, the West End. What whispers? Of a society, rich men, powerful men, doctors, even. They call themselves the Septemviri. The Seven. They have appetites for the occult, for anatomy. They see Whitechapel as their personal hunting ground. Their laboratory. Sir William Gull? I whispered, the name from the brothels. He's one of them, she said. The Queen's physician. But he's not the only one. They believe, they're cleansing the city. That these women are a sacrifice. A new theory. A terrifying one. A conspiracy that reached the very top. It made Walsh's corruption look like parish pump politics. Where did you hear this? I demanded. A source. A disgraced doctor, Crow. He's terrified. He says they're protecting the killer. Or that they are the killer. All 7 of them. She showed me a small, silver scalpel, its handle carved with an owl. He gave me this. Their token. A secret society. It explained the surgical skill, the resources, the sheer, contemptuous arrogance. It explained how a man could walk away, covered in blood, unseen. He wouldn't be. He'd be in a carriage, whisked away to a Belgravia mansion. I now had 2 paths. Walsh and his gutter rats, or the Septemviri and their aristocratic butchers. My mind, my educated mind, seized on the latter. It felt right. It felt bigger. We became reluctant partners. We tried to trace the Septemviri. We went to St. Thomas's Hospital to ask about Gull. We were met with cold stares and stone walls. I tried to tail Gull's carriage, only to be stopped by a man from Special Branch, who quietly advised me to mind the sewers, Inspector, and leave the palaces to us. The conspiracy felt real. It felt impenetrable. Then came the double event. September 30th, the night the city held its breath. The first was Elizabeth Stride. Burner Street. Another cutthroat, but nothing else. He had been interrupted. A man driving a cart had seen a figure running. I was there when Walsh arrived, a sneer on his face. Gangwork. See? Told you, Graves. The high-rip boys again. He was sloppy. Got scared. I'll have him in chains by morning. Before I could argue, before I could scream that this was different, that it wasn't the work, a runner came, breathless, his eyes wide. Another one, sir, Mitre Square. It's, God help us, it's the devil's work. I ran through the streets, my heart a cold hammer in my chest. Aberline was right behind me. We ran through the labyrinth, the fog tearing at our faces, the shouts of murder echoing from every alley. Catherine Eddowes, Mitre Square, in the city of London. A different police jurisdiction. He had crossed a line, mocking our boundaries, our authority. She was in the darkest corner of the square. The constable who found her was weeping like a child. This was not the hurried work on Stride. This was not gang work. This was the unadulterated, unrestrained fury of a demon. He had laid her out. He had unmade her. Her face was a ruin. He had carved it, and again, the surgical removal of organs. The womb, the left kidney. He had taken them. He's a collector, I murmured, the stench of the slaughterhouse thick in my throat. But he had left something else. Daubed in chalk on a nearby wall, in the entrance to a tenement, was a message. The Jewess are the men that will not be blamed for nothing. Walsh, arriving late, was ecstatic. There you have it, he roared, his face purple. It is the Yiddishers. Case closed. I told you. Round them up. He was ready to call in the dogs, to incite a pogrom. No, I said, my voice like a whip crack. I shoved him against the wall. Wash it off. Now. But Inspector, the local constable began. It's a false flag. It's a game. He's playing with us. He wants a riot. He wants chaos to cover his tracks. Or, my mind raced to Eleonora's theory. Or they want to blame the Jewess. The Septemviri. This is their work. A ritual. A taunt. Wash it off. Aberline put his hand on my shoulder. Arthur, calm yourself. He looked at the constable. Do it, son. Wash it off. The inspector's right. We don't need a riot on top of this. I had one. But as I watched the chalk turn to slurry, Aberline looked at me with a new, profound worry. Arthur, this is a message on a wall. You're seeing a whole world behind it. Be careful. I didn't listen. I stayed in Mitre Square until dawn. It was just me, the bloodstains, and the fog. I was chasing a phantom. A conspiracy of 7. My trauma, the one the Yard whispered about. It began to surface. Eliza. My gaze fell on a loose floorboard. One I'd always meant to fix. A memory flashed. Eliza, laughing. Our little secret, Arthur. Where we keep the truth. A strange, cold curiosity filled me. I knelt, pried it open with my fingers. Inside, there was a small, wooden box. Eliza's, where she kept her mother's jewelry. I opened it. There was no jewelry. Just a locket. Mine, with her picture in it. And a long, thin knife. A surgeon's scalpel. The blade was dark, stained with something old and dry. I picked it up. It felt familiar, comfortable, an extension of my own hand. I didn't understand. I went to the wardrobe. In the back, under a pile of old blankets, was a leather satchel. My old medical bag. I opened it. It was not empty. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a human kidney. Preserved. And beside it, a heart. A long, terrible silence. Just the sound of breathing. No, it wasn't possible. I stumbled back, knocking over the chair. The room was spinning. The fog, it was inside my head. My knife's so nice and sharp. I am down on whores. No, it was a plant. A frame up. The Septemviri. Walsh. They were framing me. But Who knew about the loose floorboard? Who knew Eliza's words? I ran to the desk. I pulled open the drawer. My personal journal, the one from Whitechapel. I flipped through the pages. My own handwriting. Sharp, precise. They don't hate them. They pity them. But the entries, they were dates I didn't remember. I pulled out my police ledger, comparing the handwriting. It was identical. I read the journal aloud, my voice a dead thing. September 8th, Annie, Hanbury Street. So much mess. I was hurried. The light was bad. I took the trophy, but it was clumsy. I must be more careful. The work demands perfection. Eliza's work. September 30th, Catherine, Mitre Square. A perfect canvas. I showed them. I left the kidney for them. A little joke. The one I took. It's safe. It is. Like Eliza's. Tainted. I have cut out the sickness. November 9th, Mary. My masterpiece. I locked the door. I had time. She was so beautiful. Like Eliza. Before the doctor. Before the filth. I unmade her. I set her free. I am clean. I am finished. Eliza is avenged. I fell to my knees. The journal pages scattered. It was my handwriting. My thoughts. My work. I was the ghost. The man in the tall hat. The cholera hadn't killed Eliza. Not entirely. The memory, walled off behind a fortress of grief and madness, came crashing down. It was 3 years ago. The cholera was real. She was sick, in pain, begging me to make it stop. But I had found her diary. Days before, I had read about her sickness. Her doctor in the East End. Her betrayal. Flashback. The room is dark. Eliza is sweating, dying. Graves is standing over her, holding her diary. Graves VO. She was dying. It was cholera. But it was more. The diary. It was a confession of her weakness, her betrayal. She had brought the sickness of the East End into my home. Into her body. The filth. Eliza. Arthur, please. It hurts. Make it stop. Graves VO. She was begging for release from the cholera. But I saw her other sickness. The moral rot. The filth she'd invited in. The doctor. Flashback. He is at his medical desk. He takes a scalpel. He is calm. Utterly calm. Graves VO. I was a surgeon. I knew how to end suffering. I knew how to cut out the disease. Flashback. He stands over her. He is not weeping. His face is a mask of cold, terrible judgment. Eliza. Arthur. Graves VO. I operated. I cut her throat. A clean, precise incision. Flashback. The blood. So much blood. Graves VO. It wasn't mercy. It was rage. It was a cleansing. I had saved her. I had made her pure again. And then I forgot. I buried the surgeon. I buried the truth. Until Mary Ann Nichols. The sickness of Whitechapel. The filth. The despair. The women, all looking like Eliza in her final, sinful days. It had woken him up. The detective Arthur Graves had been hunting a conspiracy. The Septemviri. Walsh. And all along, he had just been building an intricate, paranoid labyrinth to hide from himself. The surgeon Arthur Graves had been at work. The blackouts. The dreams of the attic room. It was Miller's Court. The neatly folded clothes. They were my clothes. The ones I'd worn there. I had changed out of my bloody work clothes and into my clean, respectable suit. I was the hunter, and I was the hunted. The sound of heavy, slow boots on the stair. A knock at the door. Loud, authoritative. Graves. Arthur Graves. Open this door. This is Inspector Aberline. I didn't move. I just knelt on the floor, surrounded by the pages of my confession, the surgeon's knife heavy in my hand. I was talking to an empty chair. It's all right, Eliza, I was whispering. The work is done. They're clean now. He'd found me, Aberline, and Eleonora, her lead, her description. It had led him right here. The door splintered. He stood there, his face a mask of horror and pity. Beside him, Eleonora Vance, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with the terrible, sickening truth. They saw the knife. They saw the satchel. They saw the journal. They saw me. Arthur, Aberline whispered, his hand on his revolver. God help you, man. What have you done? Eleonora's gaze fell on the open diary on the desk, then to the blood-stained journal on the floor. Her quick mind connected the two. She understood the motive, the betrayal, the judgment. I looked up at Aberline. The fog had cleared from my mind. For the first time in months, I saw everything. The blood, the work, the truth. I offered him the knife, hilt first. I was trying to solve the case, Frederick, I whispered. I was trying to find the man who, I couldn't say it. He didn't take the knife. He looked at Eleonora, a silent, terrible plea. He stepped forward and covered my journal with his coat. The work is done, Arthur, he said, his voice breaking. The case, it broke you. It's over. Fade to black. The cello note hangs in the air, then slowly fades. A new sound, a slow, rhythmic dripping. The scrape of stone on stone. They say the fog never lifts from Bedlam. The Royal Bethlehem Hospital. They keep me in a cell. A room, they call it. The walls are soft. The light is always dim. Aberline visits. He's a good man. He brings me paper, a pen. He says it helps to write it down. To remember. He burned the journal. He burned the diary. He told the Yard I was a hero. That the case had shattered my mind. That I tried to frame myself, in my grief, confusing my own identity with the monster I was hunting. Eleonora Vance. She never wrote the story. The true story. Her article in the Gazette was a masterpiece of its own. It spoke of a conspiracy of silence, of powerful men, the Septemviri, Sir William Gull. She let them take the blame. She gave the city a monster it could understand. A monster in a carriage, not a monster with a badge. She knows. She's the other one who knows. She came, once, stood on the other side of the bars. Was any of it real? She asked me. Walsh, the Septemviri? I looked at her. They were all real, Miss Vance. They were all part of the sickness. I was just the cure. She never came back. And Walsh? He was promoted. Of course he was. The rot. It always wins. The official story is that Detective Inspector Arthur Graves lost his mind in the hunt for the Ripper. A tragic casualty of the case. The Ripper himself, they say, simply vanished, fled, died. They don't know he's in here. They don't know he's me. Sometimes, the other Arthur is here. The surgeon. He stands in the corner, in his tall hat, his leather bag in his hand. He smiles at me. He tells me the city is still sick, that the work is not truly done. But I know he's lying. I'm tired. I write it all down. I map the alleys of my own mind. I trace the scars he left. The press still talks about him. They will always talk about him. They give him new names, new faces. A mad duke, a Jewish butcher, a vengeful midwife. They can have him. I know the truth. I looked for a monster in the dark, fog-choked streets of London. I looked for him in the gutters, in the opium dens, in the highest halls of power. I hunted him with all the skill, all the brilliance, all the obsession I possessed. And in the end, a final, long breath, I found a mirror.